Let's talk about how Singapore got crazy rich. I mean, this is one of the most incredible economic stories ever. A story that really should have been completely impossible.
Okay, to really get this miracle, you have to see where they started. And back in 1965, things were bleak. I mean, really bleak. This wasn't some up-and-coming nation with a ton of potential. No, this was a country teetering right on the edge of complete failure.
Just look at this list. It's staggering, right? Think about what you need to build a country. Singapore had, well, none of it. No oil, barely any land, no army to speak of, absolutely zero natural resources. At the time, all the experts pretty much just wrote them off. They said, this is a failed state just waiting to happen.
So that brings us to the big question, the whole reason we're here. How did this tiny island, with literally nothing, turn into an economic monster? And let me tell you, this wasn't luck. Not at all. It was a brutal, laser-focused strategy.
All right, so let's rewind. The story begins at an impossible starting point. They were basically kicked out and left to fail.
Yeah, the first thing you have to understand is that Singapore didn't even choose to be a country. They were literally kicked out of Malaysia, just abandoned, told to fend for themselves. And this moment here, it says everything. This wasn't a celebration of independence. It was pure terror. You had the nation's new leader, Lee Kuan Yew, crying on live television. Why? Because he knew just how screwed they were. He knew they were completely, utterly alone.
And that's the key. The stakes weren't just high, they were existential. This wasn't a debate about getting a little richer or staying poor. This was about survival versus just disappearing. If they failed, they'd either be swallowed up by their bigger neighbors or just collapse into total chaos. So everything they did from this day forward was driven by that one single fear.
So, with survival as the only thing on the table, their first move was also their most brutal and their most important. They had to create order.
And this is where Singapore's story really diverges from a lot of others. The leaders looked around at all the tension, ethnic divisions, political fights that were about to tear the place apart, and they made a very cold, calculated choice. They basically said, you know what, this whole messy, slow Western democracy thing, it's a luxury we just can't afford right now. They saw it as a fire they didn't have time to put out. So instead, they went for ruthless efficiency and iron-fisted discipline.
And they didn't just talk about it. They waged an all-out war on chaos. Corruption, it wasn't just frowned upon, it was systematically destroyed. Harsh penalties, no exceptions. Crime, it wasn't managed, it was crushed. Drugs, zero tolerance. There was no room for debate on this. The goal was simple: make this country predictable and safe, and do it fast. Okay, so once they had that internal order locked down, they suddenly had something to sell to the world. And it wasn't a physical thing, it wasn't a resource, it was an idea. That idea? It was trust. And this is where the genius of their whole model clicks into place. You look at the region back then, a lot of political risk, a lot of uncertainty. So Singapore decided to sell the one thing nobody else could guarantee: stability. They couldn't sell you oil, they couldn't sell you minerals, but they could sell you predictability. Their plan was to become the one essential, totally trustworthy place that everyone else needed to do business.
So their pitch to big global companies was super simple, but so powerful. It was basically, hey, bring your money here, we guarantee your investment is safe. Our laws, they're based on the British system you already know, and we will enforce them. No corruption, none. And all that bureaucratic red tape, we're cutting it so you can do business at lightning speed. For companies looking to invest, that offer was just irresistible.
And guess what? It worked. Big time. Money, factories, corporate headquarters, they all started pouring in. Singapore basically turned itself into the safe vault of Asia, the one place you could park your assets and know they were secure.
But just being a safe place wasn't the endgame. To really take off, you need a population that can actually power a modern economy. And since they couldn't drill for oil, they decided to invest in the only resource they had: people, human brains.
And the thing about their education system is how radically pragmatic it was. This wasn't about encouraging creativity or producing the next great philosopher. Nope. It was engineered for one single purpose: to churn out a super competent, technically skilled workforce that those big international companies were desperate to hire.
The focus was absolutely laser sharp. The curriculum was all about math, science, and engineering. They made everyone bilingual. English became the language of business, which meant their citizens could just plug right into the global economy. The entire goal was to create the most efficient, most reliable workforce on the planet.
But all of this success came with a pretty hefty price tag. Building this kind of economy required a level of social engineering that was just unprecedented. And this is the part of the story that gets, well, pretty controversial for a lot of people.
Just look at this number, 80%. Over 80% of the people in Singapore live in government-built public housing. And this was never just about giving people a roof over their heads, it was a powerful tool for social control. It got rid of slums, for sure, but it also let the government mix ethnic groups by design and create a society that was physically ordered from the top down.
And this quote, this gets right to the heart of the philosophy. The thinking was, if you give people a home to own, you give them a literal stake in the system. When you own your apartment, you don't want riots in the street. You have something to lose. So what do? You protect the system that gave it to you.
And that whole housing thing is just one piece of a much bigger deal, a huge trade-off. In exchange for being incredibly safe, for having stability, for living without corruption, the people accepted major limits on their personal freedoms. We're talking tight control over the media, strict rules about who can protest. It's a system built on a simple principle. Order comes first, freedom comes second. And it's a trade-off that, for the most part, the country has been willing to make.
So, when you boil it all down, the secret to Singapore's success isn't really a secret. It's just a set of principles that are easy to say, but incredibly hard to do. It's about having a clear vision, having the iron discipline to stick to it, and then ruthlessly executing that plan, no matter what the social cost might be.
And this quote right here, it nails the whole thing. It's a loop that feeds itself. The strict order they created allowed wealth to grow. And then, that wealth gave everyone a very good reason to keep protecting that order. It's a powerful, maybe even uncomfortable lesson in how to build a nation. And it really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? What price is a society really willing to pay for prosperity?